I am going to introduce Siamak Vossoughi, who is the author of A Sense of the Whole, a story collection that won Orison Books Annual Fiction Prize. The Orison Fiction Prize a couple years ago was selected by Victor Laval, and it was our first title to be reviewed in the New York Times Book Review, which was a really great milestone for us and wonderful for Siamak as well. And we're joined as well by Jessie van Eerden and her publisher, Michelle Daughter from Dzanc Books. Jessie is connected to Orison Books as well. We published an essay collection of hers a few years ago, which won the Foreword Indies Book of the Year Award for essays. And she now actually serves as our nonfiction editor. So these are actually both Orison authors, and Jessie is also a Dzanc Books author, and she'll be reading from her new novel from Dzanc this evening. Just a brief word about Siamak. He is an Iranian-American author. He is now based in Seattle, and this is his second book. His first was a story collection called Better Than War that received the Flannery O'Connor Award for short fiction. And his new book, which he'll be reading from tonight, is A Sense of the Whole. And I am happy to welcome Siamak Vossoughi.
All right. Thank you, Luke. It's been really a great honor and pleasure to have a chance to work with Luke and Orison in creating this book that came out. And I just want to say thank you as well to Malaprop very much for putting this on, and to Jessie, and congratulations on the publication of her novel. So I'm going to read two stories from the collection, and I thought I would just look for stories that I have not shared out loud as often. And although the second one is just kind of like a favorite to read, so it's more the first one that's that I chose in that way. But this is the first story, and it is called The Outdoor Movie. Arman Eskandarian didn't think there was anything strange about it at first when he asked Alyssa Green if she would like to see the outdoor movie with him at Rossi Park on Saturday night. He was glad she said yes. He got his hair cut on Wednesday, so it would have a few days to fit his head. It wasn't till Saturday afternoon that he remembered he hadn't gone to the outdoor movies to watch the movies that summer. He had gone to sit next to the big white wall of the county fair building on which the movies were projected and watch the faces of the people. He hoped she would like it as much as he did. When they got there, he laid a blanket beside the wall of the county fair building. I forgot to mention, he said, I don't come to watch the movies. What do you come for? She said. To watch the people watching. She fell in love with him. She sat down and tried to not show it on her face that she had fallen in love with him. What do you like about watching them? They're honest, he said. What about the rest of the time? The rest of the time? That's very far away, isn't it? She did not exactly fall out of love with him when he said that, but she saw she would not be able to be free with it. It was nice that the moment before him was everything, but not so nice as to make everything else a secret. At least he was honest from the start. She laughed and thought of how it seemed like it was always like this. The young men who dreamed couldn't let anyone in on their dreams, and the ones who didn't could. The last boy she had known who had been able to tell her everything had been when she was 15. What happened to them in those next 10 years to send the ones with dreams so far off the map? So far off to the side they couldn't talk and love their way back. How was it she could see the beauty of watching the people watching, but still be perfectly happy to sit among them and watch the movie, both? Have you been doing this all summer? Alyssa said. Yes, Armand said. Don't the people mind? Not anymore. They might have at first, but now they know I'm not going to do anything bad with it. With what? With their expressions as they're watching. Alyssa looked at the crowd. He was right. Nobody seemed particularly bothered. What are you going to do with them? She said. I don't know, he said. Just hold them, I guess. Some of them, she figured, were working so hard to know their own dreams they couldn't afford to stop and explain them. That was the generous way to look at it, but she felt like being generous just then. The movie started and they watched the faces. It was a romantic movie. There was joy and wonder and concern and worry and relief. At one point, Alyssa looked over at Armand watching the people watch the movie. You like it over here, don't you? Yes, he said, very much. She smiled. I'm going to go sit with the people for a little bit, she said, just for a few minutes. Okay, he said. Alyssa sat in the middle of the crowd and watched the movie. She liked the thought of Armand watching her, even if he was just watching everybody. She liked being with them in his view. She liked who they became when he was watching them. She returned to Armand. How was it over there? He said. Very nice, she said. There was a boy who Alyssa used to babysit who saw her and walked over to where they sat. Hi, Alyssa, he said. Hi, Leo. Why are you sitting over here? We're not watching the movie. We're watching the people watch the movie. The boy looked at Armand. Armand nodded. Do you want to sit and join us? Alyssa said. The boy watched with them. Nothing is happening, he said, but he didn't get up. The boy's sister came over to check on him with her friend behind her. This time Leo explained it. His sister and her friend sat and joined them. What if everybody comes over to this side? Alyssa said. That's my dream, Armand said. That's your dream? Yes. Who would we watch then? Well, at that point, we wouldn't have to watch anybody, but if it came to it, I would go and sit over there so that they could watch me. You would? By yourself? Yes. I would go with you, she said. That would be very nice. There were young men who'd asked her to go places who didn't have the imagination for a place like that, and there was a young man who did, but hadn't thought of asking her there himself. She wanted to tell him right there in front of Leo and Leo's friend, and Leo's sister and Leo's sister's friend, that when two people could sit over there together, they already had the world watching. They had the whole world watching, even if they were the only two people in the park. She wanted to tell him they could have the whole world watching like that wherever they went. And even if they came to an outdoor movie in the park in the summer, they would have the whole world watching them while they sat among the crowd. Do you trust them? She said. Who? The people. I trust them from over here, he said. I trust them unconditionally from over here. What does unconditionally mean? Leo said. It means love, Armand said. I love them from here too, Leo said. See, listen to Leo. He agrees with me. Yes, Leo said. Listen to me. Okay, she thought, so it started young. Amidst the crowd, they felt lost, and away from them, they loved them again. But what stayed the same? What stayed the same no matter where they were? Did you ever come to watch the movie? She said. Yes, Armand said. I did that last summer. Did you see anything good? Yes, I think so. I can't remember it very well. I remember the crowds, though. You do? Yes, I figure I must remember them because I had dreams about them. What kind of dreams? Nothing very exciting, really. Just the people, their faces, same as this right now. They're boring deep dreams on the face of it, but the feeling of the dreams is a nice feeling. Is that why you started watching the crowds? Yes. If your dreams are boring, it could mean you're a boring dreamer, or it could mean life is wonderful. I am hoping it is the second one. He was right, she thought. The rest of the time was far away. It was far away if they paid attention to the moment in front of them. He was trying to turn that attention into something beautiful if he could. It was only natural that he was going to be far away sometimes himself in order to do that. Don't try to bring him back, she thought. Don't try to be a bridge. Just believe him when he says that if your dreams are boring, it could mean life is wonderful. And give your dreams a chance to be boring. They've had a long time to be exciting, but give them a chance to be boring and see how it goes. All right. Thanks very much. All right. Just checking the time. Okay. Looks like a pretty good timing. All right, the second story is a shorter one. Yeah, I don't have much to say about this in terms of introduction, other than to say that I recently finished a book about the Spanish Civil War, which figures into this story a little bit. And even before I read about it in this book, I just found myself always very interested in it. And and so yeah, so that's all I'll say. And I think that that factored a little bit into the writing of this. Wanting to touch some of that feeling it was an inspiration for me in writing this story. So, Joe West's brother. The beautiful thing about fighting fascism, 89-year-old Joe West was saying, is that if you die on the side of every work of art ever created, even the bad ones. You die on the side of every book and every song and every painting, and every one of them belongs to you now as a memorial and a remembrance. We thought he was just being poetic. Listen, he said, I'm not just trying to sound poetic. What does every book and every song and every painting say? It says, I don't know, but here's something. What does fascism say? It doesn't even get to that. It says, I know. 89-year-old Joe West had a twinkle in his eye toward the rise of fascism in America. He looked like a little kid when he talked about it. I had to admit I'd asked Celine to the old black and white movie playing at the public library, partly because I thought we could use a reminder. How do you know, Celine said to me. How'd I know what? That this would be the best place to come. That's an easy one, I said. Just go wherever they're giving something away for free. I don't know about countries, Joe West said. Remember that America took its time to say anything about Hitler and Mussolini and those guys. The most reliable enemy fascism has ever had has been art. He's a writer, Celine said, nudging me. Then you're a soldier, Joe West said. I don't know about that. Yes, you do. It's all right. Model soldiers are the best kind. We're going to need you, you know. I had to admit it was nice to be needed. I hadn't heard that a lot, but I didn't want to write like I thought I was needed. I wanted to keep writing like the world was acting like it didn't need writers, but secretly it did. I didn't want to write like fascism was a target exactly either. I just wanted to aim for people and figured if I did that, fascism would look very small along the way. I wanted to write like one man, perhaps even Joe West himself, was bigger than all of fascism. We settled in for a black and white movie from a time when people were thinking of fascism a great deal. I thought of all those people who'd watched it back then, and I got more wrapped up in them than in the movie, which seemed like a pretty anti-fascist way to watch it, to tell the truth. What if fascism is just an angry way to be sad? I said. Shh, Celine said. I thought about how important it was to have a sad way to be sad, though I didn't want to discount the importance of having an angry way to be angry. The characters in the movie seemed to agree. I don't think we're going to out-anger the fascists, I thought. We may out-sad them, but I don't know if that wins you anything. I believed Joe West when he said fighting fascism was on the side of every work of art ever created. But weren't people just going to get tired of art again and want something clean and simple and straight, even if it was a lie? Even if it was a very big lie because the truth was so sprawling and unkempt? You could walk past the library and see all the life in the books, or you could walk past it and see a building, but one of those wore you out more than the other. Before we left, I asked Joe West how he knew all that. He was staying behind to put the chairs away. My brother, he said, he died in the Spanish Civil War, 1937. When I read a good book, I see him. When I hear a good song, I see him. I wonder if he saw him during the movie, Celine said, after we left. Hell, I said, which was not directed at her, but at the world, which she knew, which was another thing I liked about her. He must have seen him. I saw him, and I didn't even know the guy. The end. All right. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you so much, Siamak, and it's my pleasure now to turn things over to Michelle and Jessie.
All right, thanks so much, Luke. And wow, those were incredible stories. While we were listening to you read, I went and logged onto the Malaprop site and bought a copy of the book. So thank you for introducing that to me. So it's my pleasure to introduce Jessie. Jessie van Eerden is our very newest published author because her book came out on Tuesday. Jessie is the author of 2 previous novels, Glorybound and My Radio, and a portrait essay collection, The Long Weeping. And she's had a bunch of awards, including the Gulf Coast Prize in Nonfiction and the Foreword Editor's Choice Fiction Prize, and teaches creative writing at Hollins University. But the biggest thing about Jessie to me is that she is an incredible writer. And the book that we're celebrating tonight, Call It Horses, won Dzanc's prize for fiction 2 years ago. It's always a very competitive prize, and she probably beat out about 800 other entries with this book that is in some ways very quiet, and the story of these 3 women who are on sort of a modern day wild road trip from small town West Virginia to Abichu, New Mexico. But it's just such an incredible evocation of place, of personhood, of the complexity of being a human being. And I will let her read and not delay you any longer on that. But it's our great pleasure to publish it and to be here with all of you tonight.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Kind of overwhelmed. I can't see anyone on this view, so maybe that's better. I'd rather feel your presence with me. But I'm so grateful to Michelle in particular for all the work she's put into this book, really great care and design and time and just commitment as a press. Dzanc supports so many writers, and I know she works way more hours than probably she should. So I'm just grateful to her. I'm also grateful to Luke, also to be able to work with Orison and to Malaprop and to Siamak, whose work I love. And I'm so grateful that he agreed to read with me because it's more fun with 2. So I'm going to read from the very opening of the book, which doesn't need any introduction since it's the first chapter, just to get you to know these characters, and then just a very short portion around 100 pages in to give some background, particularly on our narrator. So this is from Call It Horses. On a notepad from the dollar store, I write you. A red star explodes around the only $1 on the cover. There is a break in the cold weather, as if the earth were taking a gasp, all the frozen grass gone to mud. It's a fissure to step into, or a point of stillness. A letter to you may become a channel or a chute, and could dislodge the thing lodged in me. At various times I have written you scraps on receipts and Denny's napkins and her untendered prescriptions. Dear Ruth. And in my childhood, there were those 3 years of letters from you and to you, the language always on fire. My thoughts shift like water when I picture those pages in your hands. The mud will freeze again after this respite from winter. In this liminal mud, I can almost see its steam. Something does begin. I write to you about the dead. I write you to stay alive, and after all this time, I write you still to become myself. Do you think regions and landscapes can body forth what's inside a person? I think that. Here in the steaming quick thaw, back then before we left, Maeve and I could smell our minds rotting in the awful lush of West Virginia mountain summer, the damp sponge of dirt. We were wringing wet like cats up from the creek. Our breathing was gagged with sphagnum moss and fetid swamp weed, and the humid fog of funerals had left a yellowing film on our skin. We had to go, you understand. We had to make it as far as we could. If there are indeed regions inside a person, she and I longed for the inner desert region, to meet its physical correlative in the bare grass and prickly pear and the quartz and juniper, the smoke of red rock. We longed for an unchoked landscape. I did not know then what the third party longed for, Nan, sitting backseat like a viper. The Atlas barreled us forward to cut through our mountains slogged shut with old skunk cabbage and October leaf rot, toward the horse fields beautifully fenced in Kentucky and the Tennessee trees from which ticks would fall into our hair. We would detour to Memphis, since Maeve, at age 70, had never seen Memphis, nor had I. Across the blue ribbon of the Mississippi, the Atlas held out Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and their blocky territories. Then the New Mexico line dotted down across Interstate 40, and there was Tucumcari, which I love to say aloud, probably a Comanche word for ambush, vocalized and transcribed and retranscribed. The bright line of I-40 would pull us into places dried out nearer the sun. It would not be your Sinai desert, Ruth, or your ancient manuscripts studied on sabbaticals, but it's what we could manage. I promised my Aunt Maeve we would make it to the desert, but I'll tell you now, we made it only to the dry Texas plains. We didn't speak when we left, only the fading hydrangeas spoke their goodbye without any urgency. On the bypass, our tongues loosened. How long? Maeve asked. Maybe 3 days, I said. Portable oxygen has a shelf life, she said. She deflected her ache onto the highway signs. When she would speak to you, did she also always deflect away? The car was a blue Oldsmobile, not in good shape, but its metal seemed lighter for its lightness and color. The car belonged to Nan, but she was demoted to the back seat as a condition of our bringing her along. We floated upon the asphalt, and when the earth flattened in the least bit, we tried to give ourselves to the road. 2 of us were wives, Nan and me, I 36 and she somewhere in her mid-20s. On a rough lumber table with a vinyl tablecloth, I write this to you, dear Ruth. Can you feel the unfolding of our disaster? I should write each word as carefully and detailed as a hieroglyph. I should choose sensibly what bird to mean soul, what horse to mean I'm falling fast through time. Each word precious. You taught me that in the letters you wrote me from your desk in Northampton, which I always pictured as dark wood, wide, strewn with books, and at the corner a vase of tulips. What promise did you see in me? Anyway, I do think it's something else after the words that might be precious. Once language slips through the sieve, maybe something remains, maybe a heart beating. I wanted the desert scrub to show me finally whether I was incapable of love, whether I lived too hermetically. She is too private, said Mother to Maeve when I was a child. The desert dust I would sit down in would body forth my arid solitude. That was the idea. I'll thatch you a roof for your hermit hut, Maeve once said to me, neither kindly nor unkindly. On the road, she crooned now in the blue car. I love automatic windows. I want to be windblown. How about you, Nan? Nan sat wounded and further woundable in my rear view, perhaps less viper and more nude bird, except for her huge mass of hair flying up and out and over, black eye radiant at its yellowing edge. She reached up in great transgression to tune the radio, so we all discovered together it was busted. Her arm was a war zone. God, he did a number on you, said Maeve. Nan said nothing audible. I pictured upon the windshield the squint of Dylan's dim eyes, his longing to fly jets, stealth bombers, and how he'd braided yarn into my black hair as if a little boy, though he hadn't been a little boy then. But we had been young, pliable. This was now the detailed work of my Dylan, Nan's arms of bruises, Nan, his wife. By what star do you guide your life, Nanette? Asked Maeve, slipping the cotton ball out from under the oxygen tubing above her ear to scratch. By what? Said Nan. It's okay. You don't have to talk, lewd little beast, said Maeve. I said Dot, Maeve, but I didn't mean it. He called me a little whore, Nan said, very small. We should make name tags, Maeve said. That's enough, I said. Little whore, little gypsy moth hair, and your little apricot shift. Maeve replaced the yellow cotton ball. I heard Ellis shake his floppy ears to get the flea out, then settle, probably with his chin on Nan's sumptuous leg. Ellis was my husband's dog, but somehow his dense hound body had found itself in the blue car. There were smudges of nose and tongue on the right side window of the back seat. I'll bring him back, Clay, I'd said to myself. Give us the right names in your book, Maeve said to me. There is no book, I said. What book? Asked Nan. It was 1990, October. The Saturday world outside of Nan's Rusty Olds, which was really Dylan's Rusty Olds, was all gray dawn and asphalt and trees thinning, then thickening back up just when I'd started to breathe. None of us had ever seen the desert. When Nan drifted off and flattened her hair against the window, I studied her in the other mirror. Still jealous? Maeve asked me. You could have been his punching bag. You dodged a bullet, as they say. Nan's pretty lips parted in her sleep. I admit to you, Ruth, the word jealous did not touch the hem. I wanted to carve out her stomach and insert myself up through her skeletal system, rip out her spine like a brittle fish's, and as I did so, it would sound as though I were running a stick over a xylophone. Not really, I said. Was it her loveliness that stung me in comparison with my weighted hair and dark, gaunt face? No, I think it was her forthrightness, her ease. I understood her to be hurt and groping after something that I understood, but not her ease. Some time passed, or it didn't pass. Instead, time swelled Maeve's lungs, squeezing out the rightful air. Her death imminent, even from the start, though I wouldn't admit it. Some silence fell. Time and silence were the big actors now, calling all the shots. When we were about 20 miles out of Caudell, West Virginia on 119 South, away from the smell of the swamp and green and the baled alfalfa, Nan roused and wiped her mouth. The first time I'd ever seen this girl, I mistakenly thought she'd held a dead baby, and I unmistakenly thought she was starved and stuck. Are we ever going back? Nan asked, as though she had been dreaming about where she'd unpack her suitcase of silk things, her one spare dress, her makeup and her filthy pictures, and beneath those pictures, her secret, beautiful ones. Or are we going to stay out there? Nobody answered. So that's the opening of the book that gives you sort of the beginning of their travels. And we go back and forth between that road trip and about a year and a half prior to that road trip, where we get sort of the build up to what's calling them west. So I'm going to read a section later in the book around page 75 where I wanted to read why Ruth, why is Frankie interested in writing to this person and addressing the narrative to her. We know, I think before this time, Maeve has raised Frankie after she was orphaned, after her parents died, and Maeve's lover was Ruth when she was away at school up in Massachusetts, and then has come back to West Virginia. And Frankie herself is in a somewhat loveless marriage with Clay, and we know that's most of the background I think that we need from this point. And around age 11 to 14 were the 3 years in which, when Maeve was in school, Frankie started writing Maeve, and Ruth started writing her back, and she didn't know who this woman was. Ruth was a professor of linguistics and got really interested in Frankie's letters. So this is the section that gives some of that background of why this epistolary address is happening. Your letters came on soft blue paper, written with care in blue ink, not quick and choppy like Maeve's handwriting. You did not write to me as a stranger addressing a child, asking what grade I was in. and what was my favorite season. Often you wrote of the desert, how in the Sinai you had heard the original language inside of language, how in Persia there could be no larger sense of night. Mostly you wrote about words themselves and about my own letters to Maeve, which you had been reading all along. Words without limits, blurred at the edges like bogland. Words as rooms one walks into. Words holding million-year-old species like amber. See the trilobite and the ancient fern, the spinal column of something extinct, still preserved in a word's withered curve. Then, when I wrote back, though I didn't understand who you were, I wrote Dear Maeve and Ruth, as if to the same person. The blue letters answered me, enclosed in Maeve's, so mother never knew about this woman who wrote to me things like, what is beautiful is you don't write words to be remembered. You are a tiny leaf miner, carving tracks in tunnels of chlorophyll on ephemeral leaves, writing out only its desire for food, like someone making tracks in snow to disappear. Because of that, the letters bring me joy here in Northampton. You called it a second waking. We wake to words in our mouth. Think of that word, mouth. Lips wide and back for the O, then rounded, narrowed for the U, the diphthong. We speak what we hear. We name what is named for us. This is your mouth, these your toes, your sheaf of paper and flower seed packs. And they pet our heads and say, good, you can survive. From speaking to writing, when we start to write, it's in the shadow of the spoken. The voice is saying, repeat after me with lines and shapes. And the hand in its proud flourish matches the names with the correct marks. But some have a second waking, you said. It comes when a word does not chase after a thing, but engenders it. You write the word light and there is light, a dim glow maybe, almost secret, but there. You write the word bird and a new species of warbler sings. You write the story of the tree and the tree thus grows. It all felt like myths or poems to me. Bits and pieces of Egyptology and hieroglyph, these first words that wrote the real trees, the flooded river banks, a person's beauty as something to name and call forth. A vase of 2 cut lilacs with ants furious and alive in them. Have you ever seen them so furious, you asked. I understood to some degree what you meant about that electric current in words. I understood that when I sat down to write Dear Ruth, the air shifted, and I had a feeling of starting over from the beginning, of being changed into myself. Then you died without my ever having met you. Maeve came home with the money and books you left her and moved back into her falling down house where she and my mother and Aunt Miranda had all grown up. She carried all those hundreds of books in pillowcase sacks, one by one from the car, like heavy litters of kittens to be drowned. She had no bookshelves, so she used bricks and plywood and 2x4s, shelves leaning and bowing, a sorry shrine. I was 14. I had sent a few letters that you had not answered, and these Maeve brought to me tied together in a bundle and unopened, and Mother saw and questioned until Maeve confessed I'd been corresponding with you. Mother demanded those unopened letters and all the others I had from you, so I gave her the box of blue letters and she burned them in the fireplace. Why didn't I save some of them? Why didn't I fight her? Maybe because Maeve didn't fight. She simply squatted in her boots and watched the fire and drank whiskey from a jar and accepted the reproach. Maeve passed her hand through her coarse cut hair so short. I wanted to touch it and was surprised that I did so. With my hand on her head, we mourned you. Why did you come back? I whispered, and not stay in that house on Aldridge Street? Wasn't it a beautiful house, all so full of her? I had no pictures of your house, but still I saw the oak bookshelves and the tall windows with green drapes, the hung hieroglyphs on parchment and reed. It was as if Maeve's face were a scrim lit from behind by your beautiful life. Maeve didn't answer. After a while, toward the flaky ash in the grate, she said, "You keep writing, write a book." She believed you could. I remember in one letter, Ruth, you told me to cut flowers daily. You said they don't have to be yours. Ownership is illusion. Make a vase by hand, change them out when they wilt the least bit, the prolific peonies and the daisies. But they don't even have to be blooming. They can be stems, they can be twigs. They don't even have to be real, they can be scribbled down. When Maeve came home, widowed, it was late winter, too early for anything to bloom. But buds were out. On our dining room table, I cleared the already collecting debris of bread crusts and loose mail and candy wrappers and set out a jar of green wood branches I twisted off a tree. They stuck out helpless in all directions. Some days after that, I brought a clutch of waking up alfalfa grass. Later on, a wild lily or a primrose I'd steal from Miranda. Later on, dandelions, half gone to seed. Dear Ruth, thank you.
Wonderful readings, Jessie and Siamak. What a pleasure to hear your voices and the voices of your characters and your visions on the page. Such wonderful work. And I am going to start off by asking Siamak a question, and then I believe Michelle will have at least one question for Jessie. And we also invite anyone who's tuning in to post any question for the authors that you might have in the YouTube chat. Siamak, my question for you is a question of form and history of form in your life. The stories in A Sense of the Whole and a lot of your other work that I'm familiar with are very short. I don't know that you would call it flash or microfiction, maybe somewhere between that and your typical short story. But, you know, the label doesn't matter. But I'm curious if there was a time or a point in your writing life that you sort of discovered the short form as a form that you felt was stylistically appealing to you, or that in some way allowed you to accomplish your vision as a writer?
Yeah, thanks. That is a great question. And actually, it's one that I think I asked myself. Usually at the point in writing a story where somewhere around page 1, I always feel like, okay, this is it. This is the one that's going to be like 15 pages. It's going to be like the length that everybody agrees a short story should be. And then, you know, somewhere around page like 3 or 4, I feel myself like coming downhill already. And I'm like, okay, this is happening again. Like, so now I'm not trying to like fight that inclination. You know, I have been able to write a couple over the course of many years that exceed that typical kind of length, but very rarely. I mean, excuse me, for me, partly like, honestly, the writers that I grew up liking and wanting to, you know, model myself after a little bit were among those who did usually have a similar length. William Saroyan is a writer who had a big influence on me, and his stories tended to be on the short side. And I was mentioning to Jessie actually in her class that Aesop's Fables was a story collection that I turned to as like, you know, feeling like, you know, if you have something, you know, that you're trying to say, like you can say it in a direct, plain kind of way. Just have, you know, like, here's what happened on the outside, here's what it means, right? And I kind of just like that idea and that.
Yeah, but something I admire about your stories is that two things. I mean, that you don't really have that, and here's what it means so much. At least, I mean, you have a little bit of it, like, you know, when your characters say it's about love, but it's not like it's not heavy-handed, it's not moralistic, so it's not like a fable in that sense. But in terms of, yes, the direct, plain sequence of events and statements from the characters. I also love how unique and real your characters feel, even in such a short space. You're able to give them a real life, and to leave so much unsaid is, I imagine, I'm not a fiction writer myself, but I imagine that a temptation for a lot of fiction writers might be to over say things and you know, try to characterize their characters by adding more and more and more. So I really appreciate the minimalism of your approach, that nevertheless, you know, there's so much underpinning your characters, and the reader can still feel that.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. Just to wrap up, I think on that thought, I think that one thing that's helped me is, like, I feel like I can detect in myself, in terms of describing characters, I feel like I can detect when I'm trying to convince myself that this is a character who exists, you know? And when I feel like I'm trying to convince myself, I know that, okay, that's not what I need to be doing, you know? Like, I need to back up and rethink. If a sentence or a paragraph is just trying to, like, convince myself,
Yeah,
I feel like it's going to be unconvincing to the reader, you know?
absolutely.
Yeah. But thanks.
Thanks so much, Siamak. Michelle, did you have a question for Jessie? I know there's one from the audience for Jessie as well.
Yeah, I'm going to sneak in and ask mine first. But
Yeah.
I'm glad that you have an audience question. So Jessie, you know, to me, one of the really striking things about Call It Horses is that, as much as it's the story of three people, it's also the story of a place. You know, the experience of being from a place, whether you love it or hate it, and how deeply that gets into you. And you talk about how the characters are made of the things from that place, and in wanting to leave those things behind, they have to leave the swamp behind for the desert, as much as they have to leave circumstances behind. So I just kind of wanted to ask if you could talk about how you chose your place in this story, and sort of, you know, your own relationship with places like that, small town places, and places that can be suffocating if you're not quite of the right shape.
Thank you, Michelle, for that thoughtful question. Yeah, place is really central to this book, to all of my work, I think, since I am from West Virginia and from a very small community. I think what was kind of a fun challenge with this book is that I quickly realized I really wanted it to be about a place of groundedness, and also a place of longing and of desire, and the place that is not known. And in that way, almost realize the place you're from is also in some ways a place that's not known, that there are layers to it, and unfamiliar textures within it that in some ways you see them once you leave it. So I wanted some of that kind of back and forth, particularly between, like, the space of the desert as a very, like, almost like mystical space to these people who have never been there. And it has biblical resonance too, of sort of wandering in the wilderness and the desert fathers and mothers. So they were kind of informing my thinking. But I think I've always been really drawn to writing the place that I'm from, and really small rural spaces as places that are still very rich for development for the inner life of the characters that are there, whether they don't fit the shape, like Maeve's character was really, she's not based on anyone in particular. She has lots of different tributaries of inspiration as a person, but I wanted to have her come home and in some ways refuse to continue to grow as a person and kind of see what happens, you know, when that kind of ruin comes into someone's life, but also in some ways how, as wounded as she was, to be able to love and nurture the life of Frankie in kind of a lopsided, you know, misguided way in many ways. But I wanted that love to still sort of be able to, in spite of a kind of stymieing of Maeve's experience of place, to still be able to come through. So I think in some ways it was a really different kind of relationship to Place Book, even though it's still in Appalachia, which is a lot of my work. But because of sort of this pull toward elsewhere, it helped me kind of maybe reframe and rethink what is the bog, what is the rural landscape, the alfalfa fields, the Guernsey cattle, like what does that look like when people are turning around to leave it and they're not really sure what it will look like for them when they come back, because it's representative of their inner landscape.
Well, you know, speaking from a somewhat biased perspective, I think you do a fantastic job of it. So
Thanks. Is it okay if I answer this question in the chat? Is that, Luke, is that all right?
Yes, let me read it. The question is for Jessie. It's also a question of form. Did this novel start out in epistolary form? If not, how did the form evolve?
Thank you, Jen Lazar, who's my student. And I will give a shout out to my tutorial students if the others are on here, since they just got done with 3 hours with me and still they're on the screen. So God bless them. I love that question. And the novel has had maybe 5 or 6 iterations. So no, it did not begin as epistolary. It was a narrative poetry sequence with different characters. And I have a really hard time. I wish I was like Siamak and I could write short things. Very hard for me. So eventually it outgrew that. I was actually inspired by Morris Manning's bucolics at the time. That had kind of an eye that was sort of this, you know, shepherd character, but it became kind of a first person narrative. Some of it became essays, and then around, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the first person, I felt like there was some kind of urgency that was kind of missing. And I also, letter writing was kind of part of the character of Frankie as she was developing. So I was kind of interested in thinking, like, I wonder, how would this reframe if it's still essentially first person, but directed toward a specific addressee, particularly someone who awakened a sense of language in Frankie when she was quite young. And so that, I kind of fell in love with that, and then had to rewrite the whole beginning to really reframe around that kind of intimacy, reframing with Ruth as the listener, who is also not still living. So also kind of thinking about, this is a letter that's not going to be read. So what is it written for? What does it do for the writer herself as she's trying to sort of work through what is happening and what has happened recently in her losses. So I finally settled on that, but it took a while getting there.
Yeah, what an interesting formal history for the book. I didn't know that you ever wrote poetry, Jessie. Do you still write poetry? And also, Siamak, as someone who works in short form fiction, do you ever work in lyric poetry as well?
Siamak, why don't you go? Poems.
Oh, thank you. I started writing when through poetry in high school, and you know, Luke, as you and I'm sure many others know, like poetry has a huge importance in Iran and Iranian culture.
Yeah.
And it's so my parents very much encouraged appreciation of poetry, and they would you know, like sitting around and reciting poems for them was like just a, you know, it's just like having a regular conversation.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful aspect of Iranian and Persian culture is just the importance of the poetic tradition. And it you know, from what I understand from from you and other folks, is that it is like part of the everyday person's life and is part of their inner, uh, you know, cultural heritage that's in their mind. And America is not like that at all. And it's so
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Well, I mean, yeah, you know, it's interesting, especially like thinking about Jesse's book and like the references to biblical texts, and you know, the in Iran, because it is a very old country and an old culture, that sense of historical weight is, we're able to find that through poets from 800, 900 years ago, you know.
Yeah.
But I think, like, you know, there's certainly a lot of poetry in the Bible, and I think like that can serve a similar role, I think, for some of the characters in stories set here, you know. So but yeah, just I'll turn it over to Jessie. What do you think?
Well, I think I don't know. I teach a seminar, and if my seminar students are on here, I love you. And sometimes if they're prose writers and they are like, "Oh shoot, I have something to do. I'll just write a poem," you know, because they're short. And I kind of have started doing that a little bit. Like I only have a little bit of time, so I'll work on a poem. It's short, it's managed. But recently, my partner said when I sent him one, he called it an essay / lyric. So I think I write prose-like poems, but I am trying to work on compression. And I think in some ways it's, if nothing else, will help my prose. But I am drawn to the small space and what can happen in the small space and the things that are not said.
I have a question primarily for Siamak, but you know, Jessie, you're welcome to hop in too. One of the things I was so impressed with in those stories, you know, Luke talked a little bit about the clarity, and you mentioned, you know, the freedom to be able to just say something, you know, and that sort of reminded me of the line out of Jessie's reading about I love your words because you're not writing to try to be remembered. And so often I think that's the most memorable thing. But so many moments for you, it felt like you had just rung this clear little bell. And I was like, I recognize that emotion. I see that moment, and I can see right through to the human heart of that moment. How do you know when you've mastered that kind of an emotional moment? Do you feel something equally strong there? Are there signposts that writers can use to kind of lead them toward those truths, or is that just sort of a natural part of the process for you?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I mean, I think that and thank you for the question as well. um, I read a quote from Murakami recently where he was talking about how he went from being a nightclub owner to a writer. And he said that he knew that what he learned from owning a nightclub was that 9 out of 10 people were going to come in and not think, you know, and his place was anything special, and they were going to leave. But the one person who was going to like it, he wanted them to just really love it, you know, like, and he said that he took that idea with him to writing, in terms of like, there's kind of a, for lack of a better term, like knife-like approach, I think, to writing fiction, where like, you know, real life is just much more squishier and like nobody like declares things as much. And you know, and like writing dialogue is a good example of like what you're getting at, you know. Like I think the effort to try to sound like, I think maybe I was talking about this in Jessie's class too, but like effort to sound like people actually sound like in real life doesn't work for me as well as the effort to sound like what people feel like in real life. And so I think that's, you know, like a big chunk of it, you know, like just allowing people to say the things that may come across as brave in like unusually brave in real life. But if everybody in a story is doing it, it's not going to stick out as much. And it'll, you know, just even out through that. So
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about that. That to write how people speak is yeah, it's pretty inferior to write how they feel. And you do a great job of that.
Thanks. Yeah, Jessie, do you have thoughts about that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just stuck on that Murakami idea of writing for the one and make them really love it. That's somehow just a really wonderful like relief of pressure. You don't have to write for the 10, just the one. I do feel like there is something about that. I love that question of like, how do you know when you know something's done, or you found the right paragraph, or you finally hit on the right image that you want to live with, you found the right form. And I feel like I think I'm always in search of that. I was just talking to my students about that the other day. We had in-class exercises and she couldn't quite, they were bombing. And then she finally found one and she was like, okay, this is it. And everyone could kind of tell, yeah, there was like a heat there. And it's kind of a mystical thing, I think, but it seems to be really trust-oriented and being able to sort of be humble before the work and not necessarily having your agenda for it, because you have to kind of be ready to be surprised, I think.
One of my favorite quotes, French poet Paul Valéry said, "A poem is never finished, only abandoned." But the question is when to abandon it, and that, you know, that goes for any form of writing. Well, I think we're up against the hour mark here. Thank you so much to the authors and to Michelle and Dzanc Books. Thank you to Stephanie and Patricia from Malaprops. Please support Malaprop's books, Bookstore, by ordering Jessie's and Siamak's books, along with the dozen other books that are on your list right now. So.
Thank you so much for that, Luke. I just want to add my thanks and my praise. We've gotten lots of lovely comments in the chat, and just so enjoyed the readings this evening, and the other just real gems that have come from you all listening to you talk. It's been really lovely. So thank you, Siamak. Thank you, Jessie. Thank you, Luke, and thank you, Michelle. We really appreciate your presence and your energy this evening, and I know that it can be asking a lot in this day and age. So truly grateful, and thanks so much to the folks who have joined us as well this evening and listened, because again, we know that there are other things pulling at our attention. So yeah, if anyone else has any other final thoughts before we say good evening.
Thanks for having us.
Just wanted to say thank you all for coming.